Mr. Speaker, the whole House has heard him on behalf of my party our sincerest condolences. The new year has started with a focus on the decades-long rape gang scandal. Across the country, thousands of girls were tortured and sexually abused at the hands of men who treated them as things to be used and disposed of, destroying many lives forever. The Prime Minister has mentioned previous inquiries. He is right. There has been an inquiry into child sexual abuse, but it wasn't about the rape gang scandal. In its 468 pages, it mentioned Rotherham just once. Is the Prime Minister confident that we know the full extent of rape gang activity?
Prime Minister.
Can I first thank her for her condolences, and can I thank her for reaching out over the Christmas period when I lost my brother? I really did appreciate that, and I appreciate it today. Mr. Speaker, on the question of a further inquiry, there have been a number of inquiries, some of them localised, including the Mayor of Manchester's inquiry recently, and of course a national inquiry Professor Jay carried out, took 7 years, had 20 recommendations, none of which actually were implemented by the party opposite when they were in government. Now, this is a really serious issue. We must focus, obviously, on the victims and survivors. There's no fixed view on the victims and survivors about a further national inquiry. There are mixed views. But there is a view, and I share this view, that what is needed now is action on what we already know. We already know, myself from personal knowledge when I was Chief Prosecutor, that warped ideas, myths and stereotypes about victims are at the heart of this. We've known that for a decade. The Jay report called for mandatory reporting. I called for it 11 years ago. What we need now is action. What can't be tolerated is the idea that this afternoon, members opposite will vote down a bill which protects children, include Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let me just, one of the provisions in the bill of school to prevent abusers ever taking those children out of school. I implore members opposite to defy the misleading leadership of the Leader of the Opposition and vote for a really important bill.
Okay, Gary, first of all, what do you think about, I like a sort of sense of firmness in Kemi, I must say. And I also like a level of firmness in Starmer at the same time. What do you think about this first round? I call it a round.
Yeah, well, I think it was only pleasantries, you know. It was only pleasantries, and they just started.
That's just warming up. That's just warming up.
Yeah, I don't see any difference. I mean, obviously each question time is different from the last. So
yes,
to some extent, it's like two animals, and in this case, two political animals that when they meet, they're learning from each other. They're learning, you know, how they question and their mannerisms and their type of question and such. So they're just sizing each other up. So I think it's this is normal behavior as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the next one.
Mr. Speaker, I'm shocked that the Prime Minister would say that actions were not taken. He knows full well that we accepted 18. He knows full well that we accepted 18 of the 20 recommendations in the J inquiry and went further, launching.
Okay, that's a point which I mentioned earlier. She's saying the Conservative accepted 18 of the recommendations of the 20, and she said that he knows as well. And what the Labour Party is being saying is that the Conservative have not touched this issue or the recommendation by Barnes J. But Kemi has just pointed out now, and she wouldn't lie to say that they've accepted the recommendation of 18. But I don't know if the recommendation which has been accepted, have they been effected, you know, if they start. Yeah. Let me just continue. Yeah. Sorry, you want to say anything, or just
No,
carry on?
yeah, carry on.
A gangster task force that found 550 more perpetrators. That shows that there is still work to be done. In Rotherham alone, there have been over 1,400 victims. Across Oldham, Bradford, Bristol, Rochdale, and dozens more towns, there have been thousands more victims. But no one has joined the dots. No one has the total picture. And it is almost certainly still going on. One victim from Telford, and I know he says that victims have different views. We have different views across this house. But one victim from Telford says she wants a national inquiry because it will hold people accountable in a way that previous inquiries have not. It is very possible to have actions, take on more, and still have a national inquiry. So why won't he listen to victims and launch a national inquiry which would have the power to summon witnesses and make them give evidence under oath?
She says they accepted the recommendations. They didn't act on them. Exactly. One of the central recommendations was what happened for the 11 years ago. They've been tweeting and talking.
Just to make a point there, just like what I said, and Starmer's just brought it out now, that they accepted the 18, but they have not actioned it. That's what Starmer is actually saying. They've accepted. You and I, there can be some discussions on something, some 20 points which have been set out, recommendations. Accepting it is one thing, but acting on it is another thing. But I can see where Kemi is coming from, as Kemi has set out her case, whereby that there could be much more, a wider grooming thing which is going on that one could actually miss if you stay within the narrow aspect of that inquiry which took place. She want to widen it out a bit. Anything you want to say, Gary?
No, go ahead. No.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just continue here with this discussion.
Okay, we've been acting. Well, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition has been an MP, I think, for 8 years. Her party have been in government for 7.5 of those 8 years. She was the children's minister. She was the women's and equalities minister. I can't remember her, I can't recall her once raising this issue in the House, once calling for a national inquiry. It's only in recent days she's jumped on the bandwagon. Now, Mr. Speaker, in fairness, if I'm wrong about that, and she has raised it, then I invite her to say that now, and I will happily withdraw the remark that she hasn't raised it in this House in the 8 years that she's been here until today.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is being very specific because I have raised this issue. I've raised it in speeches. I've raised it publicly. He knows that as a minister, I would not have been speaking on this specific issue. I was not a Home Office minister. But Mr. Speaker, I will remind him about other victims who came to me who are helped. The victims of the Tavistock scandal who came to me as a minister. I didn't send them away like his safeguarding minister. As his Labour Party were calling me transphobic, that we launched the CAS review, which even his health secretary has accepted. So we do right by victims, Mr. Speaker. The reason why a national inquiry is important is because this issue is systemic. It has been involving local and national officials, the police, prosecutors, and politicians. He talks about some of the local inquiries, but these interlinked issues cannot be covered by local inquiries alone. In fact, the leaders of the Manchester inquiry resigned because they couldn't get evidence, they couldn't summon witnesses, and not a single person in a position of authority has been held to account. The Prime Minister called for 9 inquiries in the last Parliament. Does he not see that by resisting this one, people will start to worry about a cover-up?
Let's take a pin right there. As to what she's actually saying, and she's still fighting and setting the stage there as to. And one of the reasons why I'm stopping this, Gary, is because I don't want any copyright thing, so that's why I'm breaking up the different sections and not letting us play fully like that. But I think Kemi is setting out her case. And what I do not understand is why the Labour Party is not actually accepting that point there for further inquiry. Because the further inquiry is needed, because it's like when you go on the train, they always say mind the gap. There's some gap in the whole evidence that need to be fully fleshed out. And I believe that is where this is falling short, and that is where and Elon Musk has come out and actually um, commended Kemi on Twitter as well in fighting that case. Now, another interesting thing I can say is that, to keep mentioning Manchester. Well, Andy Burnham, yeah, Andy Burnham, the mayor for Manchester, is actually wanting a second inquiry, a follow-up inquiry, and it's one of the most senior Labour figure who has actually come, because the recent vote which they just had yesterday regarding this was a whipped. So therefore, over 300 or so Labour MPs voted, over 111 or so Conservatives. Some of them abstained. So therefore, they whipped it. So therefore, people weren't able to vote on their free reign. Yeah. Yeah. Continue, Gary.
I mean, I think in addition to what you're saying, I think that
Yeah.
Kemi is right that Keir is being very elusive. He hasn't answered any of them questions.
Yeah.
He's not answering the question.
Well,
He's
he
deflecting.
never asked a question. Well, every week we have been doing this. He doesn't answer questions, but they always say prime ministers don't answer questions, so he's not doing anything new. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue here. Bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're enjoying this as well.
And we have to focus on the victims and survivors, and it isn't helpful. This sort of lies and misinformation and slinging of mud doesn't help them one bit. Doesn't help one bit. Mr. Speaker, she raised a question of a victim with me, quite right to, and I accept that victims and survivors are in different places on this. Those that I've spoken to are worried about the delay of a further inquiry. The last inquiry took 7 years. That would take us to 2031. Now, these inquiries, amongst the issues that's been raised with me, and if she's been speaking to victims, they'll have raised this with her, is that it's very hard for victims and survivors to come forward to explain what's happened to them. They do not want to be rushed through this process, which is why the last one took 7 years. It's not sensible to suggest that this can be done in a hurry, on the cheap, and comprehensively. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, that would take us to, let's say, 2030, 2031. The victims that I've spoken to want action today. I agree with them on that. But what I don't understand, I genuinely don't understand, is why anybody today would vote against the Children Wellbeing Bill, which will protect children who are vulnerable today. It will kill the bill. It will stop those provisions for children exposed at risk today. I implore them, vote for the bill. Don't wreck this in this misguided way.
Mr. Speaker, it is very possible to have shorter inquiries, especially if they are covering work. Let's look at new areas.
You see that point? You see the point what she's saying now? See where she's coming from now? It's the previous one was limited, so the extra bit now of inquiry will cover those areas which was where the gap is. That's where she's coming from. If we just meticulously listen to what she's actually saying.
Former Labour MP Anne Pryor said that there were councillors and terrified of being labelled racist. A national inquiry would ask if there was a racial or cultural motivation to some of these crimes where white girls were seen, as Jack Straw said, as easy meat. The member for Rotherham was sacked from Labour's front bench for speaking out about rape gangs. Does the Prime Minister now recognise that sacking people for telling the truth creates a chilling effect that means victims aren't listened to?
Well, I'm very happy to call out anybody who hasn't acted properly in these cases. I've done it many, many times before, and it doesn't matter to me which political party they're in. I'll call them out and I will condemn them. Mr. Speaker, when I was Chief Prosecutor, I took measures to confront this head on. The first of the mass prosecutions for an Asian gang was in Rochdale. My team came to see me. It put a number of Asian men in the dock. They wanted the green light for the first of these cases to take place. I gave that green light, but on one condition, because it came to my attention that one of the men that was going into the dock had previously been arrested, but not charged. And I said, you can bring the first of these mass prosecutions, but only if you look back at the file where we weren't charged and tell me what went wrong with a report so that I can start to put it right. And that's what started the reforms I brought about. So that's the approach I took in practice, whilst others were tweeting and talking. It's the approach I would take now in any case where there's wrongdoing here. But what we've got to do now, Professor Jay has said this, we have had a number of strong findings. There are 20 on the table from Professor Jay. We've got to get on with action. Don't block it this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, we need to focus on what this is really about. This is not about the Prime Minister's work in the CPS. And I would say very respectfully to the Prime Minister, it's not about you. It is about the victims. Be a leader, not a lawyer. We know that people were scared to tell the truth because they thought they would be called racist. If we want to stop this from ever happening again, we cannot be afraid. The Labour Party has adopted the APPG definition of Islamophobia. That same APPG report said talking about sex groomers was an example of Islamophobia. This is exactly why people are scared to tell the truth. And the lack of clarity means that innocent British Muslims are smeared by association. That is not fair, and only a national inquiry can solve this. So will the Prime Minister look again at the Labour Party's adoption of the definition of Islamophobia, its chilling effect, and rule out introducing it in government?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Do you think that the whole racist element or the Islamophobia and the targeting of the word Pakistani gangs or so is the issue in a way that they don't want it to come across as being calling a culture or community generally?
Who?
Speaking? No, the whole. That's what they're talking about from a long time about it. They're very politically correct.
Well, that's all it is. That's all it is. And I think, okay, I mean, would it be wrong? No, I was going to say something because it's known up and down the country. Yes, that the grooming gangs for girls and such is Pakistani, isn't it? That's a known fact. Now, politically, they don't want to say things like that because it's going to come to it. For them, it may come across, as you said, in a racist way. It's like the blacks. What's the blacks known for, really? I mean, what is synonymous, I would say, with blacks? What would you say, Bill?
Well, the stabbing, the knife crime and stuff like that. Is that what we're talking?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you hear of a knife crime, stabbing, or a gun, you're not going to straight away think, oh, it's white, it's a white man, or it's a white boy, even though it may happen. But you're not going to hear automatically. The society doesn't think, oh, it's a white youth firing a gun, or it's a white youth stabbing another person. No, automatically anybody that gets caught up, whether you're the victim or the perpetrator in that kind of crime, is automatically thought of as black. And so, And so the thing about it, sadly, Sadly, they don't look at it. These crimes, whatever the crime is
Yeah.
not going to be addressed properly. I don't care what the crime is. It won't be addressed the way it should be because they're going to
Decorate it and pretty it up.
as race bring a racist element into it, and that's not what they want to do. So it's not going to be dealt with properly.
Because one of the things which you're going to touch on, which I went a bit touch on, but let's touch it now, is that the young boy which was recently killed on the bus a couple of days ago, the black boy, 14 years of age, and the narrative is that there, single mother, the mother, and also he's in the drillegram, and all these different, it fits the narrative, and I think my good friend Stephen Akinsanya, I was trying to get him on earlier today. I was listening to him on LBC talking about the whole thing. So it is a very interesting point whereby people are so afraid sometimes to just call things out as they are. And that is what has happened. We don't call things out as they are. So one places them and pushes them under the carpet. And then the carpet starts to bulge. And then it gets dirty and nasty because you haven't dealt with it, because you're trying to play safe. But I believe not by playing safe, you actually create more harm. Let us just finish off with Kemi here.
I will call out any aspect that has prevented anybody coming forward or any case going forward when it comes to violence against women and girls, child abuse or child sexual exploitation, as I have been doing now for the best part of 15 years. But yes, some people will say there should be a further inquiry, but that does. I accept that, but that means all the victims and survivors who are going to give evidence need to be in a position to do so. Not all of them are. I've been speaking to them. There are some that do think they are. It will take time. All of the institutions will have to give evidence. That will take time. This will delay things till 2030.
He's hiding, man. He's hiding.
Mr. Speaker, yes. We already know what the major flaws are. And my argument is we should get on with that action.
What's the major flaws? What are the major flaws? What are the major flaws that he's talking about?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has effectively told.
Are the major flaws in wanting to do it again?
Yeah, he's saying
is that what he's saying? What are the major flaws?
Yeah.
Well, let's use this comparison, and this comparison is a bit way off. There's a DJ in Jamaica named Vybz Kartel, and Vybz Kartel was incarcerated because of allegations, some murder, whatever like that. However, there was some tampering of jewelry and all those sort of things, and really and truly, they should have actually started the case all over again. And of course, he spent 13 years or so in prison. And as a result of that, he took it to the Privy Council and he was released based on technicalities. Right there. You know what I'm trying to say? So the flaws of that is that to start, the Supreme Court in Jamaica had a choice of actually doing the case all over again, because that's what the Privy Council said, send it back to Jamaica, and they decide. The Supreme Court looked at it and said, hang on a second, they're not going to find all these different witnesses again. Some of these witnesses die, and all those evidence. So therefore, the best thing to do was just on technicality, let him go. And I believe this is on a lower level now with this particular case. It seemed like you're not going to find all the different evidence, same people again or so. And I believe that is where Starmer is talking about the flaws. But to his detriment and to his argument, that's not what Kemi is actually saying. What they're actually saying is dealing with the gaps, because they're talking about other areas in the UK. There could be other grooming gangs, and that is why I fear that this thing could get much bigger when it finally push come to shove. If they don't deal with it now, Gary, and just try to deal with just 18 recommendation or the 20 recommendation. I need to look to see what are these recommendations. Yeah, I don't know if I answer the bit regarding the flaws.
Yeah. you've only done what you can do, really.
Yeah.
But you know, again,
Yeah.
as you said while you was talking, he's hiding these things.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to come out with anything.
Yeah.
He knows.
Yeah.
He knows if he says the right thing, if he said the right thing, which up to him is the wrong thing, he's in a whole lot of problem. He knows that.
Yeah.
So he
And-
said very little. He's trying to answer politically.
Yeah. And just to let you know, a couple of days ago or yesterday, there was the 3 million petition which was done. They had a debate in Parliament about it, not in the main area, but there's a big debate about it, and that is something that is going to be looked at again. Someone is actually saying that what they need to do is do another one now, pushing the Prime Minister and to go for this recall for another election, because there's some bits that just came out which I'm going to really look at. But anyhow, let's look at the final bit for Kemi.
Told us that he's not able to do two things at the same time. This issue of a delay is a weak excuse, and I would say to him who wish to smear all British Muslims based on the actions of a small minority. He is talking about distraction tactics. Let us have the truth. The Prime Minister cannot tell the House the full scale of the scandal. He doesn't want questions asked of Labour politicians who may be complicit. He won't listen to the victims. He won't listen to the victims who are calling for a national inquiry. He is making this all about a bill this afternoon. Later today, he will tell Labour MPs, including in Telford, Rochdale, Bristol, Derby, Aylesbury, Oldham, Bradford, Peterborough, Coventry, Middlesbrough, Newcastle, Ramsgate, to tell all of these people to vote against a national inquiry into the gangs which have systematically gang raped children in their constituencies. This is one of the worst scandals in British history, Mr. Speaker. How?
Note this point. Listen carefully.
Sorry? Just, this is a very, very important issue that does matter to the country. It matters to all our constituents. I want to make sure they can hear what's being said by the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the worst scandals in recent British history. But how are they going to explain to their constituents that obeying his whip is more important than doing the right thing?
2024, the best way to make money with Amazon.
Gary, the point I want to flag up right there. Sorry, let me just stop this thing here. Shut up. Yeah. The point I wanted to flag right there, and apparently the video was cut, it's a commercial right there, was that Starmer came back and said, this is the first time you call it a scandal. First time Kemi called it a scandal or so. You know, so when I look at that a while ago, and ladies and gentlemen, you can tell me what you think. I just see it like just political bantering, as someone would say, just political gesture politicking around.